Yeah. Yeah. So Fluke, let's see, how did this kick off? So we have submitted a grant proposal to Arbitrum. They're doing some really cool stuff in supporting communities and teams that are trying to advance like Web3 education. And as part of that process, I came across Fluke. Um, Fluke, do you maybe just want to take a second and explain kind of what you do for Treasure, Arbitrum, and then also he's a game builder himself. So I think we'll get along just great. But yeah, Fluke, do you mind just doing like a quick little intro for us?
Yeah, for sure, man. So, yeah, I'm Fluke or Adam. I've been in blockchain for a while since 2013, but just actually specifically in kind of in Web3 gaming for 2 years now. And I'm one of the co-founders of Knights of the Ether, which is a Web3 gaming ecosystem, and our kind of core game offering is called Blightfell. It's like a deck building roguelike that's free to play right in your browser, and it's similar in style to like Slay the Spire or Rogue Book or Monster Train, if anybody's played those, or if you haven't, you can kind of think about it like a single player Hearthstone kind of. Um, but yeah, so we are one of the largest and oldest game cartridge partners for Treasure DAO, and they're kind of like the only name in gaming right now on Arbitrum, and they've been there since late 2021, very early adopters of Arbitrum, and Arbitrum has obviously grown to be the largest layer 2 solution for Ethereum. And gaming is growing a lot there as well. And then separately, I also run this Questbook Gaming Grants program specifically for the gaming domain through the Arbitrum DAO. And so I was elected through the DAO through like a democratic vote to be the person who basically disperses 200,000 Arbitrum tokens over a 6-month period to gaming specific grant applications. And so that's been really cool so far. It's actually my first foray into like working for a DAO and working on the kind of like grant dispersal side of things. It's totally new because usually like I'm the one building the game, the project. I'm the one going and asking for the grants and trying to get funding. So it's nice to be on the other side of the table for once. And it's been really eye opening. And it also is great because I get to see, we have had 31 applications in the first 6 weeks. And it's really cool to see all these people, what they're building in the indie game space or, in the community space, like this one, and getting to work with all these different projects and people, and also being able to be that person who like sometimes, not all the times, but sometimes gives good news of saying, hey, like you get to have funding for the thing you're working on that you're so passionate about. So I really like that. I don't like the aspect of having to say no because I definitely am like, that's tough. Like I'm an empathetic person and I like working with people and being able to make things happen. But of course, that's been part of the learning experience for me as well, is learning how to say, hey, this probably isn't quite good enough. You need to do X, Y, and Z, and then come back in a month or two. So yeah, that's my kind of short and dirty intro, and happy to chat more about any of that.
Okay. Yeah, man, that's awesome. So for our community, for the month of November, we had chosen fundraising as the topic that was top of mind for everybody. So we've had like some VCs come through to do these type of talks. We've had some founders come through, a couple other folks. And really like the last two pieces that we really haven't dug into much is using grants for smaller teams to kind of help pass that bootstrapping phase in development, like before they maybe go to like a proper VC round. And then the other one is angel investors. So like, I guess from a, like what do these grants typically help game studios do? Like why would they go to a grant other than, or as an alternative to maybe some of the other ways to fundraise a project?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I kind of preface it with that there are a lot of different types of grants and grant sizes, and grants that might make sense earlier on in the development process or later on in the development process. Like speaking from specifically the Questbook grant side of things, like, I got to kind of set up what my mandate would be. Obviously, there's a larger mandate from the Arbitrum DAO to expand the Arbitrum ecosystem, bring more network transactions is kind of like a good metric, but something that we don't focus purely on from the gaming side because it's more about culture and bringing people over, and hopefully these are stickier users. But I would say for the Questbook Gaming Grant Program, where we have a cap of 25,000 Arbitrum, which is quite a small amount, especially for a legit game studio. We're focused more on like indie developers, small indie studios, hopefully with some already level of playable demo of their game, or some type of traction to show for their community or their initiative or whatever it may be, that we can help them maybe go from pre-alpha to alpha or alpha to beta, or get that demo polished up to the point where they can go ask for more funding. Like we see ourselves as a kind of a first step, a bit of a cosign, if you will, of like, hey, these people are working on something cool. They need a little help kind of, getting through the first inning or the third inning or whatever it may be, or getting across this, finish line of the alpha, so that then they can go show that either to a community, or they could go show it to a larger grant program, or they could go show it to angels or VCs and raise maybe more off of that. And then there also are some smaller, less ambitious projects that we funded, like specifically on-chain chess, which is it's like not what you'd expect when you think Web3 gaming, right? But I like the idea in that chess is so just like globally recognized, and a lot of people play it, and a good way to add blockchain to it is like these kind of the ability to see everything transparently. Cheating is actually like a big issue, hot topic in competitive online chess right now, and there's all these wild wild things that went on with like people using excuse my language, but like butt plugs to like message each other while they're in the middle of of tournaments. And so it's an issue that he's solving as a solo developer, and it's not something that's going to onboard a million people to Arbitrum, but it's a solid use of the tech. And so there really is quite a gamut even within the Questbook grant program, which is smaller. Then maybe we could chat about, what a larger grant program, like something like a gaming STIP, might take on for the Arbitrum DAO, which is something that's being worked on. And yeah.
Dang. Okay.
Blockchain solves this. Yeah. Funny.
When we started this, I did not expect that flow of conversation to come out, but I'm glad it did. People are cheating with chess.
I thought we could keep it real here.
Okay. So maybe we can go like through some basics. So like, sure. Let's say, part of a co-founder team, we have maybe just a concept for our game. Like we have some chops, like maybe my co-founder has like game development chops, worked in Web2, whatever, shipped things. Is that a good time to apply for a grant, or is it better to maybe try and develop like an MVP, which is, it can cost a lot of money, and I think that's where a lot of teams kind of dies. It's like the chicken or the egg type thing. Could they demonstrate a supportive community, and is that kind of weighed if they lack an actual playable demo? Like how is all that evaluated?
Yeah, totally. And again, it's like, this is my non-answer in that it totally depends from grant to grant program, right? And I'll speak from just my perspective of the Questbook grant, which is that I put out in the initial documentation, I need to see a playable demo. I need to see some level of traction. I need to see something that shows me that you don't just have a white paper for this specific grant program, because I wanted to have maximum impact on the Arbitrum gaming ecosystem in my 6-month time as this role. And so I want to be able to show that impact. So I would say, as a more general answer, know the grant that you're applying for, read through the documentation on it, see what, maybe if there are already ones that have been accepted, why are these being accepted? What are the comments on them? What kind of commonalities do we have on the applications? There's 3 that have been accepted so far and 6 that have been rejected. Read through those and see why is something getting accepted, why is something getting rejected. And you might choose to not even apply because it might not be applicable to what you're building, or it might say, like in an example for mine was just a hard reject on anything that did not have at least some level of playability or some demo to show. If it was just a white paper, just game design, even if it had a cool team, I was like, no, this is not a quick enough impact for what we're trying to do with this grant program specifically. Now,
Smart.
If if the creators of RuneScape had showed up and say, hey, like we don't have a demo, but we're going to make a Web3 RuneScape on Arbitrum, then it would be a
Come
different story, and
on.
I'd be like, why are you coming here? But
Yeah.
I would of course give them a grant. But it's important to kind of know the grant you're applying for, and maybe if you're just trying to find some initial funding, maybe you tweak your initial vision a bit to fit that grant program and go along the lines of what that reviewer is looking for. That's not something that's necessarily negative. People definitely have a negative view of like grant hopping and like going from place to
Yeah.
place, getting grants and tailoring their projects to those programs just to get funding and kind of vampire attack those ecosystems. That's not cool. But if you want to, uh, if you want to get funding, if you want to go through grant programs and you're actually building something interesting, try to tailor it to the one you're applying to if you can. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So like I know, um, I'm not going to say who it is publicly because I don't know if it is public or something like they're willing to share. But I know one of our founders is in the process of applying now for his game, and he's actually the one who told me about the program. And one of his best pieces of advice was to go through and look at the other proposals, see, one, what's in the proposal itself, but then also really pay attention to the comments. Like what was missing, yeah. What are some questions you can just be on your front foot and answer or try and, elaborate upon. So I think that's really, really, really good.
Yeah.
Really good piece of advice.
To go off of that, I think, so there is this comment section at the bottom of the quest book grants proposal area. And I try to give like an initial comment basically saying like, hey, here's a few things I'd like answered. Here's some questions. And if I get kind of the answers I'm looking for those questions, or at least there's some level of like, accountability for why those questions can't be answered, then I usually say, okay, hey, let's take a call and let's chat through the process. And I think an important thing to keep in mind when you're going through these grant programs is that, like the way you work with the person reviewing the grants is also important as well, because you need to be available to bring new information to the table. You need to like, sometimes it hurts if maybe someone says no and you need to do the X, Y, and Z to change it. You might not always necessarily agree with that feedback, but you do have to go through this person to get the grant program. And, I've been on the side of applying for grants and I got feedback that maybe didn't align with what my vision was and I didn't agree with it. And that's understandable, but am I going to change my entire vision to get this one grant? Probably not. But if there's ways that I can find some overlap and a win-win compromise and both things can happen at the same time, that's an important thing to look towards as well. So I've had a couple bad experiences with grant, appliers who were really negative or defensive when it came to reasoning as to why their project maybe wasn't at the stage to receive a grant. And I would just say like, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot if that's your reaction, because there's then hardly any space for you to come back in a month or two and kind of continue that process if you're not willing and open to at least hearing feedback at the first leg of the process. Yeah.
Yeah. So how about that for a hot tip? Don't burn a bridge.
True. That's so important. And in Web3 in general, right? It's like all about like in the world in general, who you know and what your network is, and who you can call on for a favor here and there and who you can do favors for. So it's always important to think of like, not in a transactional sense, but like, could I help this person out because maybe they'll be in a position to return the favor in the future? And it's like, the world kind of does run on favors once you get to a certain kind of level. So it's an important thing to keep in mind.
All right. So it's here. So before I ask my next question, number one, everyone, thank you for showing up. Appreciate you. If you want to be brought up to the stage to talk, feel free to request. If you have any specific questions about applying for a grant or Arbitrum, Treasure DAO, any of those, feel free to drop them in the comment section as well. I can MC and ask them for you if you need me to. Okay, so maybe we can take it to the next stage. So we understand what these grants are for. They're for teams who kind of have some initial traction or a playable demo, who maybe just need a bit of funding and like a co-sign to get some awareness, grow. So from there, how is like the grant actually distributed? Is it all at once? Is it divvied up? how do you, how do you differentiate someone who's asking for like $5,000 versus someone who's asking for $15,000? Like, how do you, I guess, determine if that's reasonable or makes sense? Like, can you just kind of go into that process a little bit for me?
Yeah, totally. So for the Questbook grant program, it's split up. It's milestone based, and then there's certain like KPIs you need to hit for those milestones. So a lot of the programs or a lot of the applications we're working with, a lot of the projects, we're just setting it up between 3 milestones, and it just kind of depends the scope of the game or project, the experience of the team, how much their initial ask was, what they're spending those funds on. We go through all of that kind of in the due diligence phase, which is both, reviewing their proposal and talking through things over calls. And then we will fund them for the very first milestone with the expectation that they will do XYZ before milestone two on a tentative date. We don't do like hard and fast. If you don't hit this by January 1st, you're not getting that milestone two, because game development is this beautiful, chaotic
Yeah.
process where nothing happens on time. And,
Yeah.
but so we, that's how we go about it. We set KPIs, we do milestones. We base the initial amount on kind of scope and the where the funds will be used. And then I will say, as like a little pro tip, sometimes asking for the maximum grant amount is not in your favor. Most people tend to ask for the maximum amount, no matter what that maximum amount is, and no matter what they're trying to do for their milestones. I will say I pay more attention to an applicant if they have put very specific cost breakdowns for what they hope to achieve over milestone 1, 2, and 3. And
Mm,
it shows me that they're thinking more deeply about, like, here's what I actually want to get out of this grant program, here's what I think I can accomplish, and here I know what I'm going to need to spend to do that. If you go in and you just say, I need 25,000 ARB, I want 10,000, 10,000, and 5,000 on milestone 1, 2, and 3, it doesn't show me that you've thought super deeply about how that funding is going to be spent, and you're just trying to get as much as possible. And I understand you want more money to build your thing, but it's nice to see that there's a level of due diligence on that side of saying, here's how I'd like to spend that funds, and this is what it's going to accomplish.
gotcha. Okay, cool. We had a question coming in from Hangry. What's up, Hangry? Sorry again about the time of these calls, man. I know they're always super late. But let's see. Would you expect to see Web3 integration in the game demo, or is it not expected at this stage of the grant?
Yeah, and it depends. Some demos are only gameplay. Some actually are coming from a more like Web3 native game studio side, and they have a lot of the implementation, or maybe they already have like on-chain crafting, but not the gameplay yet. And so it's just kind of a case-by-case basis. And I'll kind of take it as it is and look at it in the context of the whole project and what they're asking for the grant and what their milestones are. Or specifically kind of my mandate of showing maximum impact on Arbitrum gaming in the first 6 months, I do want to see some sort of usage of the Arbitrum tech stack by the end of that 6 month period, or by the end of milestone 3 for that project, because I would like to be able to point to projects 1 through 10 at the end of my 6 month stint and say, hey, like, we accomplished these things, and look at these new transactions on Arbitrum, and look at these new users coming over to play this. Just from like a selfish perspective, I'd like to be able to show that, hey, I did have some impact. And so I do want to kind of hit those metrics before the end of 6 months. But yeah, it's a case by case basis.
You know what's really standing out to me in this conversation is, like, I think a lot of teams be like, oh, I'm trying to build a thing, I need money, I'm going to apply for a grant. And oh, this like chain or DAO or whatever is just giving out money. Cool. But there's a why behind why they're giving out money, and there's a goal that they're trying to achieve. And likely, if you can understand those things clearly when you go to submit your proposal and align it in support of those things, it would greatly increase your chances of being approved.
Yes, 100%. I think you need to understand the why as an applicant, one must understand the why of the grant program and what the goals are out of it. And just like speaking from my personal experience, we have more of a off-chain game than we have our economy on-chain. Applying for a grant, we got feedback that, hey, like, as a chain, we want to do a lot of transactions because that is how we monetize. Is there a way that you can tie the metrics that you're proposing in your asks on your milestone to something more on-chain focused. And we were able to implement an on-chain XP system that basically is a better way for us to track daily active users, retention, session length, all of these sort of things, but in a more on-chain way. And it also has the double-sided effect of having more transactions on the chain we're asking for a grant from. So that was a good example of, hey, we got pretty strong feedback that like what this grant program is doing doesn't super align with the way that we've set up our application. And then we were able to work in that feedback without changing our overarching vision, because it's great to have on-chain data. It's great to have, more insight to those things. And it was a way for us to bolster our data room while also being able to help that grant program meet their mandate of seeing more transactions on chain.
Mm.
So yeah, it's something that you can do in the middle of the process, but the more you can show that in your initial grant, I think the more the better, because then I'm going to see as the reviewer, this person is thinking deeply about what the point of the grant process is, and they're not just here to kind of vampire a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a great example. So it really just turned into a win-win. Like you were able to improve what you're building. They were able to, create some metrics around what they're trying to achieve. So it just made it easy on everyone.
Right. It turned into a no-brainer because it was like, hey, look at this thing we're now doing. And we went and we did it and we turned it around in 2 days, and we showed them already all of the transactions coming through from our live player base. And so it was
Very
very easy
cool.
for them to see like, hey, this already works. Like as they scale and get more, funding from us, they're going to be able to bring more and more of this on chain. So yeah.
Okay, so I see Erasmo's asking a question. I know it's going to be a banger too. Always has great questions. In the meantime, a couple folks popped in, I think, after we had started. Do you mind maybe just giving like your elevator speech on the current grant program that you're helping run? And, I see a good portion of game developers here in the audience. Yeah, why would they come through and take a look at the grant program?
Yeah. Yeah, so this one we're running through Questbook on behalf of the Arbitrum DAO. It's a 6-month program with 200,000 Arbitrum tokens to disperse over that 6 months. We've accepted 6 proposals already and rejected a good amount. We've gotten 31. A few of them are kind of in the resubmission process where I thought they maybe weren't far enough along, and it was, hey, come back in a month or two. But the kind of the mandate that I've set up for the gaming domain for this grant program is make indie gaming great on Arbitrum. And so I want to see playable demos. I want to see cool indie vibes. I want to see like a culture fit. I want to see traction if you're a community, or great like unique initiatives if you're focused on like the education side of things, or like the quests or achievements or on-chain badges. There's a lot of different angles you can come at it. I'm mainly funding indie games because I just think more cool indie games on the chain will bring more people trying to service those games with infrastructure, and will bring more users over to try something out initially on Arbitrum. I think the biggest obstacle to getting people to come play like games on Arbitrum is getting them to play the first game on Arbitrum, because they're already in their Ronin ecosystem. They're already over in Immutable or Avalanche, and they play games over there, and people are pretty siloed. So getting people to try or to see that one cool indie game that pops up on their feed, and yeah, they maybe have to take 5 minutes to bridge over to Arbitrum and play it, or it's even better, it's free to play and they can try it out and they really love the game, then they want to bridge over. That's kind of my mandate, is I want to create a really cool culture of indie gaming on Arbitrum and hopefully bring new users in to take part in that.
Dude, you crushed that. I love I love the concept of one, you're helping indie games, which just means a lot to me. Like, I don't know, I guess I just always align myself with a small guy trying to do big things. But it also gives you a ton of at bats, which I think is super important based on like how early everything is, just getting more and more potential swings at a home run.
Totally. And that was something I actually put like almost specifically. I said more shots on goal, but basically the same idea, which was that if we can rapidly iterate with 100 different indie games and instead of trying to put all of our money in the bucket of one AAA game. I think that's a better chance for onboarding people
Yeah.
because AAA games are higher risk, higher reward, but spread your bets with indie games, I think, is the move.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, Erasmo. He said, "Hey there. Thanks for coming over and thanks for signing up. No problem, brother. Two questions. Question number one: what are the expectations regarding the size of the initial user base? I guess let's start there, and then I'll read number two.
Yeah, okay. Well, I guess clarification. Are we saying the initial user base when you come to apply for the grant? Are we saying initial user base when you're getting done with using the fund? Okay, when you come to apply for the grant. Yeah. So no expectations. We have games coming in with us with small user bases, with kind of what would be called a medium-sized user base for Web3 gaming, which may be still less than 1,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have people coming in with no community, no user base, no social media at all, but they do have a really cool playable demo. And so it's just kind of case by case. There's no expectations there. It's a lot about a mixture of, are people going to find this game fun? And it maybe build a good user base if it doesn't already have one. If it does, are they going to be able to meaningfully build off of that user base with the funding they're getting for these 3 milestones? And will we be able to show some sort of impact within the 6-month grant program? That's kind of my thinking around that.
Boom. There you go. Okay, question number two. Regarding measuring on-chain activity, is it mostly about buying, selling assets, or is it also about users interacting with the on-chain game logic?
Yeah, it could be anything and everything, right? For like measuring on-chain activity, I think, I don't know, there's two schools of thought and they're not necessarily like mutually exclusive, which is that like on-chain gaming is the future, autonomous worlds are the future, things with high transaction count on low cost L2s or L3s, like that's a really cool space and that's something we're totally looking at. And then there's also games which like are more on the side of what we're building at Knights of the Ether, which are mostly off-chain game logic, but then you have the economy happening on-chain. It's all fair play. And like the example I gave earlier of us setting this kind of on-chain XP system, that's a good way to start, maybe not having to implement hardcore on-chain logic into your actual game engine, which can be quite a lot of development debt, especially if you didn't build it that way from the beginning. But yeah, something like an on-chain XP system or a referral system or some sort of UA, like there's a lot of accessories and things that orbit around the core game itself that you could build that on chain and could be kind of tied into the overall offering to a chain that you're maybe trying to get a grant from.
Boom. Erasmo, let me know if you want any other clarification on that. Anybody else have any questions? Again, feel free to drop them in. I'll just keep rolling. All good. Thank you. Okay, cool. All right, Flook. So actually, real quick, where did Flook come from? We never even addressed that.
Yeah, no, I get that a lot actually. And so back in the day, I was kind of semi-pro in Overwatch, never quite got good enough to hit the upper echelons, but I noticed a trend with professional gamers and that they had like a cool single syllable name that was sometimes like a misspelling of other words, and I thought that was really cool. So back in the day on console and as my gamer ID, I was reading a book at the time named Fluke, Fluke, about like I don't know, it was a crazy book. There were basically like whales that are actually like government submarines spying on like a deep ocean civilization. And yeah, it's quite wild.
Dave
I'll
the
see if I can
Diver
link
right
it in
here,
here.
man. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that was just kind of the inspiration for Fluke. And I think it also has like a fun connotation of like a fluke is something that happens like as a happy accident. And so it's just like a good way to live your life as well as like having the preparation to then take advantage of kind of flukes or happy accidents. So yeah.
Okay, so I don't know if this is true, but my wife and I watch The Office a ton, and I think I remember Kevin, the character Kevin, at one point saying that flukes are the most populous fish in the sea. So there's like some cool connotation. Like, yes, it's rare, but it's a good chance. It's a good chance.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So flukes are those like really like flat fish?
Dude, I don't know. I think
No,
so.
I don't know either. I'm basing it off of a fluke is also the like water that blows out of the spurt of the top of a whale. And so that's where the
Oh,
name of that book came from. But flukes are also a sea mammal. It looks like, I don't know, they look like little worms. Actually, I'm Googling it right now.
dude,
But yeah, these things must be
I like the
everywhere.
little rabbit holes this conversation's taking us down.
Yeah.
Okay, so circling back. So I was gonna ask, give me three things that founders must do, should do when they're applying to a grant. Give me three things for the love of God they should not do.
Okay. Okay. Number one, read the grant details and mandate. Know what you're applying for. Number two, take your time filling out your submission and make sure you're hitting those points that the thing you just read is discussing. Make it nicely detailed and organized so it's easy for me to read through, easy for me to see the vision. And three, uh, ask for the right amount. Show me that you've thought deeply about why you need these funds and what you're going to be using them for. Don't default to asking for the maximum unless you have a good reason to ask for the maximum and you can show me exactly why you want to use the maximum. Because I would say over like 75% of the applications, I think were all max. And it was like, there's a lot of, yeah, back and forth here. So, and
Mm.
then three that I would not do, I would say, don't be don't burn bridges like we talked about earlier. Don't get too defensive or upset or lash out if things don't go your way in the initial discussion. Like I specifically have always left it open-ended. It's never been a harsh no, except for games that only had white paper and I show and could show we're basically showing minimal effort. It's never been a no. It's always been a I'd like to see XYZ in a resubmission in a few months' time and let's pick it back up then, because I always believe that people can get their shit together and step it up and get to a point where it is something that's viable. So yeah, don't burn bridges. Um, yeah, um, don't apply for grants that aren't a good fit for what you're doing. Like don't grant hop or vampire attack ecosystems because it's also going to be like kind of a detrimental effect on your reputation. And there are people who hop from grant program to grant program, and it's not a good look. I think especially it plays into the kind of crappier side of Web3, which is more about vaporware and scams and people spinning up things that don't have real kind of meat on the bone. And then third,
You're crushing it, by the way. These are awesome.
thank you, thank you. I'm trying to think of a good third one. I think it kind of plays into don't ask for the max amount, or if you do have a good reasoning. Maybe the third don't would be I've had yeah, this kind of falls into the don't get upset, but I've had people like subtweet or like take like messages out of context and like tweet them about like, oh, I laughed so hard when this thing happened and they told me to change this about my vision. Like they just don't understand, yada yada. And
Mm.
it's like that feels bad, man. Like I don't want to say no to anybody. I want to give you like a good reasoning as to at least why me as the grant, kind of domain allocator is maybe saying no at this juncture. But it doesn't mean that there's no value in what you're building or there's nothing that you can do to like overcome that. It just might mean you're not a good fit for the grant program here. And maybe you should like, check out a different grant program. So yeah, that's along the don't burn bridges angle, but there's your three don'ts as well.
Boom. Boom. Okay. That's pretty solid. That's pretty solid. You did all right there. I'm trying to think. Mm, I think you've made it through my gauntlet of questions. I think you've come out relatively unscathed. Um,
Nice. Can I ask you a question?
yeah. Shoot.
Okay, so um so you are going through the grant process right now and you did a good job of asking for like a quite moderate sum, and that was something that was like a good applicable to like, hey, we're not trying to ask for the max, like we kind of know what we are and we know we want to grow at this stage. um how was going through the grant process so far for you, at least the initial steps? Like anything that maybe Questbook can do better with their platform, or we could do better as like domain allocators? Just how was the process for you in any ways that maybe it could be improved?
Oh, that's a good one. Um, so the process itself was pretty easy. I would say discoverability for one. Like I ended up hearing about it from a friend, but if he hadn't have told me, I would have never known. Um,
Right. Yeah,
I'd
that is a
say,
huge issue, and just to jump in, that is something that it's hard to do, like, we get out all the time, "I didn't even know this grant program was around," like, "I've
yeah,
never heard about this," and it's
yeah,
just hard to get it out of the bubble of the ecosystem, and I try to blast it out on Twitter, and we did a Twitter space with Arbitrum, and I've done it on my personal account and stuff, but at the end of the day, it's like, all those things on Twitter get washed away in a 24 to 48 hours, it's hard to get the word out, so, yeah, word of mouth maybe is something we could incentivize more, like a finder's fee or something cool, I don't know.
yeah, yeah, for sure. I would say like the actual process was very straightforward. Your guys' documentation on what you were looking for made it really easy for me to submit my proposal. Um, I think I originally had submitted it for like an educational grant, and then I did need to move it to the gaming side, which wasn't too hard. I just like in essence kind of copy pasted and then added all of the comments from the first one. But if there was like some way to do that without having to manually do it, that would have been nice.
Right, right, okay.
But I would say like honestly the the on both applications the team has been super responsive. I think they've asked good questions. Yeah, like if we were missing something, they were pretty straightforward in asking for it. And honestly, dude, like you didn't know me from a fly on the wall, and you took my ass to come here and talk to us. So, I mean, you get two thumbs up from me on that alone.
Thanks, man. Thanks, man. I try to do that. I think I like having more like low key discussions. I like going on big spaces. I think that's one of the best parts about Web3 is like most people are down to like network and link up and like, rising tide raises all ships kind of vibe since we are just still so early. And so that's something I try to be a proponent of. And I think what you're doing here obviously is the same and is such a great initiative. So kudos to you for setting all this up.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Um, dang it. Oh, dude, I have I have a gut feeling that I'm missing some really really good questions. Um, by the way, anybody has any questions, feel free to drop them. See you on my grant application soon. Boom.
Let's go. Nice.
Okay, wait, I have a question now. so, so if someone is preparing to submit a grant application, can they join your community, like ask for feedback or network with people who maybe have done it or you yourself to like dot their I's, cross their T's before they actually submit? Does that exist?
Yes. So yes, they can. I would say in my initial documentation, I believe I put my email and my Telegram, and people are welcome to reach out even ahead of submitting their initial application. I will say that's actually maybe a good practice in general for things like this. Like I'm not super plugged into the VC world, but I've known that basically warm referrals are almost the only things that get funded. Like
Yeah.
knowing somebody. So if you cold DM a VC partner, you're probably not going to get very far, and it's probably not going to do well. In the same way, just throwing up your application and no follow up or no reaching out beforehand, it's not necessarily going to get just outright rejected, but you're leaving a little something on the table of being able to make that personal connection, getting some valuable insight before you kind of make that first impression on the actual like Questbook page. So yeah, definitely reach out to me. And this is also feedback I've gotten in that there should be at least a community, like a Telegram group chat or Discord group chat or something for the people who have been funded, at least for the process to everybody kind of chat about what they're working on and just having that space. We can maybe open it up and have a space where anybody who's thinking about applying as well, because I'm happy to be more available to folks to do more things like this, whether it's in a voice chat or a text form, just to give people more information about the process and all that good stuff. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and happy to so we we have a channel now called Game Grants. And right now it's just kind of a list. But we could probably set up some sort of a role to show that members have successfully earned a grant, and then other members could potentially tag them with queries. So yeah, we could probably do some support stuff on our site too, if it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to surface it here in this Discord, I'm happy to be a part of that. And you could basically, we could put a call out that, hey, are you thinking about applying for a Questbook Gaming grant? Have you already applied or have you received one? Come join this channel in, the Gaming Startup Collective. And, Fluke is here and other people who have already been accepted are here to help answer questions and help guide people through. I'd be happy to take part in that. I think that's a good idea.
Okay, cool. I'm going to tag myself in that comment so I don't forget. Channel roll or okay. I had another question come up, and this was so. Let's say I'm a gaming team. I've successfully gotten a grant. Now I'm like in the inner circle. I go through and I execute on my milestones. I do what I said I was going to do. At the end of that, or maybe a couple months before, I realize I need more money to continue to chase this dream. Are there additional grant funds allocated for that kind of team where like they've already kind of been in this grant stage, now they're here? And are there like networking opportunities with like proper VCs or angels that kind of spin up as part of going through this process?
Yeah, it's a no to both right now. There is probably a space in which this program shows some level of success after the first 3, 4, 5, 6 months, and we're able to go back and ask for more from the DAO to continue the good work we're doing. But there's nothing in place for that now, but we've already been talking about it internally that we'd like to do that at some point. And then there is no kind of like community set up for like, oh, if you already have the Arbitrum Questbook Gaming grant, here's these available things open to you. But I've been talking to people and saying, hey, this is kind of a good springboard to maybe go on and ask for a larger grant from the Arbitrum DAO itself, or to go and try and raise from angels or VCs. Like you get at least a little bit of a cosign after having gone through this smaller grant program. And while we don't actually have the tools for you to do those follow-on fundings, there at least hopefully it will help you in that process. And maybe that's where you could step in here at Gaming Startup Collective, and it looks like you've done a good job of compiling those resources and saying, hey, here are some specific resources. Since you were a good fit for the gaming grant on Questbook on Arbitrum, here's 5 things you can maybe follow on and look for more funding afterwards. And yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Very cool. Yeah, I think that's I think that's something that we're learning as we go along. Like, so a lot of us are members of the Blockchain Game Alliance, Game 7, a bunch of other communities. And there's a lot of founders that are like just kind of lost, like there's no real, hey, what's up, Grand Marquis? Thanks for joining. There's no like single repository for information to like make that journey slightly less painful. But then it also like for teams like yours also, like you guys are trying to reach these people, and if there was an effective way to do that, just like you're saying earlier, just seems like a win-win for everybody. Just build faster with less tiers. Like sounds good to me.
Yeah, no, I'm with that. I think obviously, like you said, like that was the first thing that came to mind when I asked you about the program. You said discoverability. Like if you hadn't had a friend to tell you about it, you wouldn't have known about it, right?
Yeah.
And that's one of the main pain points for Questbook, who runs a lot of different grant programs, and specifically this grant program as well, is discoverability. And I think even a huge DAO like Arbitrum with $4 billion, dollars to give out, people still aren't plugged into that. It's hard to get into, to get dug into these grant programs, to these DAOs where there actually are these opportunities, because they are pretty opaque from the outside. So having places where people can come and have that information like digested for them and laid out in a simple manner and help guide them along that path. And then the benefit of also working alongside other peer groups and community to do that journey together. I think that's huge. Yeah.
It's kind of like how everybody says, like Web3 really is about community. And I mean, that's what we're doing here.
Preach.
Yeah. All right. So as far as I know, you've made it through my questions for the second time. Looks like Sweaty Yeti and 1208 are typing up a couple things. Oh, I lied. Question. So can you kind of explain the differences between the different grant programs that are going on. So like, so you're part of the community ARB grant, is that right? Did I get that right?
Yeah, so Questbook has basically set up their grant program through Arbitrum DAO. So Questbook is a company that runs grants on blockchain, and they went to the Arbitrum and DAO and said, "Hey, look, we've run XYZ grant program for other DAOs. We'd like to ask for 1 million Arbitrum tokens to run a grant program on behalf of the Arbitrum DAO under 4 different verticals. And those 4 verticals are the one that I'm in charge of, gaming, Arbitrum new protocols and ideas, Arbitrum dev tooling on One and Nova, and Arbitrum education, community growth, and events. And so those are 4 separate places that people can apply for these specific Questbook run grants that are denominated in Arbitrum tokens.
Very cool. So real quick before I say my next thing. Oh, there you go. Yeah, I got it.
Yeah. So if you go there on the home page is the top 4 grant programs are the Arbitrum one, and then specifically the one that I run is Arbitrum Gaming right there. And then if you click into Arbitrum Gaming at the very top, it's actually in quite small font. It should be larger. It says program details here, and here is clickable. Click on here, and that's going to take you to a Google Doc where I've written out kind of what we're looking for this program specifically. And I'll just go ahead and even just link it here. That's just even easier.
So Questbook is the one that kind of manages the grant process. They came to ARB, said, "Hey, let us, run a grant program for you." ARB set aside tokens. Their community voted you in to kind of help oversee the gaming side of it. Are you overseeing the other grants as well, or with underneath this community grant, or are those different teams?
Yeah, so you're right all the way up to the point until that I just focus on the gaming. And then there's kind of a core Questbook person who is like the project lead who helps all 4 of the individual domain allocators, 1 per vertical.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay, very cool. Sweaty Yeti, appreciate the discussion here. Flook, I've learned a lot. Excited to apply for the grant. Couple questions about Treasure DAO. Do you have any thoughts, feelings about the game partner program? Let's start there, and then we'll click the other ones off.
Yeah, cool. So Treasure DAO is freaking awesome. We have been building with them since April of last year. We're one of their kind of oldest and largest game partners. I love them. Their team is so just cracked and gigabrain, and they really have a great vision for what Web3 gaming can be with this kind of base layer of infrastructure and publishing and magic token with all of these interoperable indie studios building on top of it. I think it's really, really interesting and unique and innovative. And it was what initially drew me to joining them. The Game Partners program is pretty exclusive. They get a lot of applications, and they're very kind of on the permission side of allowing people to be game partners because the complexity that comes with building an interoperable gaming ecosystem just multiplies exponentially as more and more game partners join. And so they're focused on having a core kind of closely orbiting section of game partners to kind of help build out that initial vision. I think they've brought on 3 new games in the past 6 months, so it is kind of a slow process. And so they definitely pick and choose. I think they get a lot of applications because it is quite a cool community to be building a part of, and you get a lot by being a part of it. But then, can I just actually go through 2 and 3 here? Is that cool? Okay, yeah. So rolling. The application process for me, it was probably different than what it is now, since we applied quite early on last year in April, kind of when they were just kind of starting up. And it was a lot, it was about 2 months of back and forth with internal team members talking through what we're building and what the vision was. And a lot of it is about the culture fit and the vision alignment of like wanting to build in concert with other games and Treasure themselves and setting things up to be interoperable. And so a lot of it is that culture fit of like, are we going to work well together? Because the ability to make a game is already a Herculean task. And then the ability to connect that game with other games in a shared space is a Herculean experimental task. And so if you don't like working with the people that you're working with and doing that process, it's going to be really tough. So that's a big part of it. And then for a small indie studio in the early alpha / playable demo stage, what are the main benefits to becoming a partner? I would say the main benefit would be all of the, I mean, there's so many. You unlock access um, to technology, to infrastructure, to network, to funding. I mean, Treasure is quite well connected and quite well situated to help bolster games offerings. And you also get access to a really cool community. And that community is quite skeptical of new games and they want the right fit. And so Treasure is also very choosy about who they let in. But if you're kind of if you become a part of Treasure DAO, if you're one of those studios that gets to join because you have something really awesome to offer, the community is very accepting and is there and wants to play your game and take part and engage. So that's a really awesome part of it as well.
Very cool. And great questions, by the way, Sweaty. Typing something up here. This has been really great. I have one last question for you, and this is just something to think about. You don't have to tell me right now, but I could use your help potentially. So next month, the community took a poll, and the top of mind topic for December is generating revenue in Web3 gaming. There is a finite list of those that have done it successfully that weren't like vaporware. But if you know anyone who has experience, like firsthand, like builder experience, launching something that has generated like meaningful revenue, it'd be awesome to have them swing in and participate in one of these Q&A sessions with us.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And it is like a few and far between list. Like it's so experimental still, and like revenue models for Web3 gaming are like few and far between at the moment. One person that comes to mind is Jonah from Realm, who is also a Treasure DAO partner, and it's more of a GameFi project, and that it's like an idle clicking game. There's no like true gameplay element, quote unquote. It's more economy based, but he's done a really interesting job of creating an economic game that grows without feeling like a Ponzi, that has been quite revenue generating for him and for its players as well. I'm not sure if he does a lot of public stuff like this. He's more of kind of a solo dev type guy, so I will ask him.
Okay.
And then another person who might be a good fit would be Ben Abinger, who is the founder of Battlefly, which is also a Treasure DAO project. And they've done a really good job of generating revenue. He comes from a more like kind of business background, so that's been kind of his focus. And he's more public and willing to do stuff like that. So I'll reach out to both of them and I'll let you know what they say.
Dude, you're a legend. Thank you.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, see that right there is like the community stuff. Like, okay, my network, I can get here, but like, as long as we're both like cool, like your network can get here. We can just
right, and everybody can grow. There's no bad news of like hooking people up with other folks. I think it's just always the move. Yeah,
dude, right on. Okay, Blockchain Insane, take it easy. Thanks for joining. Any last comments, questions, concerns before we let Flook get back to building? You got 5 minutes before this thing's wrapped.
And I will also hang out, and I'll be in GSC here. So if you ever just want to ping me in general, if you guys have questions, or it sounds like we might set up a little channel in here for the Quest Book Gaming Grant, I'll be around. So if you think of something later, no worries.
Sure. Yeah, and if there's anything, so you're kind of like an outsider, kind of looking at what we built here. If there's any gaps you're noticing on like the founder journey where we could like build resources around, just let me know.
Yeah, let me look through it. I skimmed a little bit and clicked through a few channels, but I mean, it seems like you have a lot going on. It seems like you have a lot of good resource channels. Yeah, I'll get back to you on that. Down to give some feedback for sure.
Yeah, no homework or nothing. Don't work on it at like 6:30 p.m.
I already wrote it down in the scratch pad. It's happening. Sorry,
it's happening. All right, everybody. I'll stop drawing this thing out. Fluke, thank you for joining.